Hi guys, welcome to my channel, and how are y'all doing today? So here today on Abby the Witch, I have a very special guest. This is my husband, Quack. And today we are going to be talking about what it's like to be specifically an atheist and a spiritual witch as a married couple, and kind of how that works in our relationship as a married couple, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I asked on Instagram and on YouTube if you guys had any questions for us, just how that dynamic kind of works. And I didn't get too many questions, but that's okay. We'll just roll with it. I actually have a question or two for him, and he might for me too. So I think this will be an interesting discussion.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I'll start out by, we'll start out by the questions that people asked, and then we can ask our questions.
Yeah.
Does that sound like a good idea?
Yeah.
Okay. Blood, Sweat, and Steel from YouTube asks, does your husband celebrate any of the Sabbaths with you, such as Yule or Letha, or do you both do your own thing?
Well, I mean, I feel like it'd be kind of weird if he just celebrated a holiday or any day by yourself and I wasn't involved. I feel like that'd be weird.
Well, it would be weird for us, because I've heard of other couples that are together where like the witchy partner does do everything by themselves.
Yeah.
Or with other witches.
Yeah, I mean, I can see that. I don't know.
But you and I specifically, like, we do everything together. Like, we do everything together, pretty much.
Well,
I mean, you work and I do something separate, obviously. Like, that's...
Yeah, I mean, we don't do everything together. Like if...
We don't poop at the same time.
I feel like, you know, I have my hobbies and you have your hobbies, and that's more like, you know, like your YouTube thing, your video editing thing, that's all, like, you do that by yourself, and I'll do my, like, side projects by myself.
That's
but,
true.
You know, as far as, like, you know...
But, like, anything special, like, anything, like, super, like anything that was meaningful to you, if I can join and be a part of it, like, I usually try to be.
Yeah.
You know? And you always do that for me, too.
Yeah. I think a holiday is different because it's, like, a certain energy, you know, and I don't want to compare, like, Beltane or something to, like, the 4th of July, but it's like if I decided to, like, go celebrate the 4th of July by myself and told you, like, it's weird because, you know, you'd be like in red, white, and blue shooting fireworks, and you're like doing that alone. Like, that would be weird, you know? It's like...
Well, it depends though, you know? It's like, I don't know, like, neither one of us are very, like, patriotic people, you know? So,
right.
Like...
But
I feel like if one of us woke up one day and was like, I feel like wearing red, white, and blue, and...
Right, but, okay, so that's... We normally do something for Thanksgiving, even though it's like...
We think it's fucked up?
Yeah, even though it's a horrible holiday, but, you know, we just like to eat, you know? And it's like...
Well, and it will cause drama in my family.
Right.
So we just do it. That's the main reason for me.
Right, and if we didn't, like... cook together and, like, you know, if I just decided to, like, have a meal, like a really very elaborate meal on my own and ask you to be involved, like, I feel like that'd be weird. Right? I don't know. And I mean, and it's not like I don't really think that, like, anything you do for the Sabbath is very unusual.
Right.
You know, and it's like...
Right, I'm not asking him to sacrifice any animals or, like, you know... do anything like
Right.
go skyclad or anything like that. Like it's nothing. I mean, I guess we do that in our private bedrooms, but I'm just like outside. Like we just have like bonfires, and you know, like for most of the Sabbats. Well, I mean, as long as it's not like Yule and freezing outside or something, like we'll just have like a bonfire, and like I might do some spell work or something, or some divination, and you just kind of like sit there with me. Like it's never like, he kind of just is like there on the sidelines, like to support me. He's never really like, because clearly he's the atheist in the relationship, so he's not like, you know, you do things if I ask you.
Right.
You know, if I'm doing like protection magic and I want to protect my family, like I'll ask him to be involved because I want to protect him. Even though like he might think it's kind of silly, I don't, and he supports that, so
yeah,
you'll participate.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you know, like I don't believe in Christmas, but I still go to your family's Christmas.
Right, because my mom is very Christian, and
yeah,
and my dad is very traditional.
Yeah,
so.
And I don't think, you know, I don't know. I mean, you can make that very, like, religious.
Yeah.
I think these days it's not necessarily a religious thing anymore.
It's just a Hallmark holiday.
Yeah.
I mean, it's celebrated around the world, but...
Right. But if someone asked me to go to church with them, like, I wouldn't be
Coconut.
Like... Yeah, if anyone asked me to go to church with them, I would never be like, oh, God's not real, so why would I go to church? Like, that's not... I mean, that'd be so weird, you know, like, I don't...
You could say no.
Right, of course you could say no.
But there's a proper way to say no.
Right, and I don't think, you know, I mean, everyone has their own ways of coping with the world or understanding the world, and it's not up to me to tell them they're right or wrong.
Right.
And to tell them how to live their lives.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And that's all we want is witches. Like, I feel like we get... well, I won't go down that rabbit hole, but there's some certain people of certain religions that...
Right.
Like, they tell us what we're doing is wrong. But that can be, like, from anyone. That can even be within the witchy community. Telling us that we're doing something wrong, or atheists being like, this is bullcrap, or whatever.
Yeah, I guess that's one thing is, like, yeah, you can be an atheist who, like, devoutly believes that what they believe is the only truth in the world, but, you know, that's just so boring, too. You know,
yeah.
I feel like you have to accept that, you know, I mean, truth is, to some degree, truth is subjective.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I don't know.
Especially with spirituality.
Yeah.
Midnight Cryptworks from YouTube asks, was he always an atheist, or how did he go down this path?
Well, yeah. I mean, I grew up in a Christian house. I went to church mainly because my grandma, she was very Christian, but you know, Asian people have sort of superstitiousness about inside of their culture, or Korean people specifically are fairly superstitious, and so it's like...
Jackson! Sorry, our cat's scratching the door.
Yeah, Korean people are fairly superstitious, so it's like not really a...
It's like a fusion.
Yeah, it's like a fusion, and so... You know, I guess, like, you have a lot of Christian beliefs where, like, anything that's, like, invisible and can affect the world that's not God is evil, and then the only thing other than that is, like, God. So, you know,
like in Korea specifically?
No, in like Texas.
Oh.
Right, that's like how most people see good and evil, right? It's like Like if there's any sort of like ghost apparition, type of thing, that is almost always evil, right? There's no such thing as like a friendly ghost to a lot of people.
That's
right?
interesting. That's like a Southern Baptist.
I feel like that, yeah, or like anything that's, and so there's that, but I grew up Baptist. I think I just learned early as a kid. I was always curious and I always like thought things through, and I sort of just came to the conclusion as a child that like God just didn't exist. And of course, that was from my own observations. I used to pray like every night as a kid.
Aw, really?
Yeah, I used to pray to God every night, and
Aww.
it just never felt like it did anything.
Like, why am I wasting my time?
Yeah, and as I grew older, my mom actually became more spiritual, or spiritual in a different way, and decided to start going to temple. And so I went to a Buddhist temple for
a long time.
Yeah, for a while, from like for most of my middle school into some high school. We went to Buddhist temple on Wednesday, and to the point where like the monk of that temple gave us a dog.
Is that where you got your Korean fighting
Yeah, that's
dog?
where we got our Korean dog from. And
what's the breed again? Sorry.
I don't remember what her breed was.
It's
it's kind of like a Shiba Inu.
Yeah. Of Korea, though.
Yeah, it's like a Korean Shiba Inu. But yeah, we had, and I learned a lot from the Buddhist traditions. I've been through a lot of Buddhist ceremonies. There's a lot of like chanting and sort of fires and incense, and at the end of one ceremony you actually get like burnt with the end of an incense.
Do you really?
Yeah, and I remember getting them burning my hand and stuff, and you get like this little welt, and and meditation, there's a lot of that, and so it's just a lot of ceremony involved in it, and a lot of history that you learn. And I think that's one thing that's sort of like sort of weird about Christianity. I guess you learn the history of Christ and stuff like that through the Bible, but it's like it never feels like history in church. I don't know. It's hard to explain.
Yeah, well, I feel like being raised Christian, Sunday school was always more about the history, because you're a child and they're like teaching you like the roots of Christianity. But I feel like when you go to like a sermon, like you're in a church service, at least my experience, it was always like there was like a specific lesson that he preached, and he would always refer to the Bible and use like real world examples to like preach his sermon,
Yeah, I think is like the difference between like sort of a objective history versus like history used to influence you.
Yeah.
Because they want you to behave a certain way or to do certain things, and they use history to try to get to convince you to. It's
history. I'm using air quotes if you're not watching this and listening to it instead. But yeah, it's kind of like when the South says the Civil War is about states' rights.
Which, in Texas, when they teach you the Civil War, that's what they make you say. I remember.
To influence you, though. Yeah. I mean, clearly it wasn't, but that's, they kind of like break the truth and re-put it together and say, no, this was actually what it was, just to like make you think a certain way.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's not really religious history is like, I don't know. I guess that's a little different because it's basically just.
Well, it's history, but the only source is the Bible, right? It's like.
Right,
it's
or
not like
the
they
Quran
never,
or whatever.
Right, like it's not like they ever bring like, artifacts from Jerusalem and.
Well, I mean, some museums do, probably, I'm sure, right?
Right, but I'm sure they never. There's no anthropology around it. There's no.
Not in church anyway.
Secondary sources. I mean, of course, there are secondary sources. Like you can read Leviathan. You can read like Thomas Aquinas and stuff like that. But like,
Leviathan is part of the Legion.
But they never use those secondary resources in church.
No,
right?
Of course not. Leviathan is evil. They wouldn't even.
Well, the book.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But you know who Leviathan is, right?
Yeah, of course.
He was in the Bible. He was like basically the sea monster that God. Anyway. Okay. So you stopped when you were like 10. You said something in God.
I was fairly young. I mean, and it's not like there was a hard stop. I think.
Yeah, it was over time, probably.
Yeah, I feel like when I was 10, that was when like I started veering from Christianity, and my eldest cousin died when I was like
14?
11.
Oh no, 11. Okay.
Yeah, I was pretty young, and maybe I was like 10, but I had asked like a lot of people what would happen to him in the afterlife. And I think, yeah, and I got a lot of like responses that are like, well, if he wasn't 100% devoted to God, then he's in hell and shit like that. Like people would say stuff like that.
How could you say that?
Yeah,
about a young person who just died.
Yeah.
Like tragically too. Like,
yeah. And it's like, I don't know. I mean, when you get those sorts of responses from people who are, older than you, or
sure,
you think, as a kid, you're like, you think of this person as an authority figure, like, and the inconsistency of all of it sort of, the only assumption you can make is that they're all full of shit, that they don't really know, nobody really knows.
Oh, see, I was thinking the opposite.
Yeah.
When I'm a kid, that's very interesting that you just said that. I did not expect you to say that, because when I'm a kid and I hear someone who is an adult and I look at them as like the all-knowing, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think like, oh my God, like that did the opposite effect on me. Like that's why I grew up so fearful.
Yeah.
Like, oh my God, if I don't do this, I'm going to hell, or.
Yeah.
That's it's just interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's just the difference between, our personalities. I was always sort of a boundary pusher as a child, and so I would I learned by doing, right?
Yeah.
And so and I love projects and things like that. Like I would always arts and crafts and things like that, but I would always
nothing's changed.
Yeah, and I would always take those projects and I would say like, oh, but what if I did it another way?
Mm-hmm.
Like, why am I doing it the way that these instructions say when I could do it this way, right? And so, I mean, and I think I learned quickly as a youth that instructions are often wrong, and you can often figure out a better way to do things. And I think, similarly, like authorities are often wrong. And
yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. And I'm just saying, like most people, it's like very impressive and really cool to me that you even thought that way as a child. Whereas like, most people I feel like progressively get that way as they get older and their brains literally grow, and you start questioning the world around you. Like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Why the fuck is it that way? And then you start questioning things and questioning authority and pushing boundaries, and I feel like that's a lot of people.
Yeah, I think I learned early because my mom was a entrepreneur, and I saw a lot of her businesses. Like, I saw her try a lot of things in her life and try a lot of different businesses. I saw her go from selling stuff at a flea market to getting a bookstore to owning her own printing shop, and
Right.
Seeing all of those sort of entrepreneurial experiments and seeing like, oh yeah, you can really just like do whatever you want, like, and I don't know, I think, that probably taught me the most, just like seeing my mom just.
Do you think that, I have another question of my own. Do you think that having like, because I grew up Lutheran, I was it, right? Do you think that growing up with like Christianity and Buddhism and like two separate main like spiritual perspectives or whatever, do you think that helped you also see things like go down a more atheistic path?
No, I mean, I think I was pretty much a non-believer, non-spiritual person after the Christianity thing. But then, I never took Buddhism as seriously as I took Christianity. And, one
could
thing...
be the age difference, too.
Yeah, and the one thing about the Buddhist community, it's less pushy. There's no one...
I feel like it's less orthodox. It's less, like, dogmatic.
Oh,
maybe?
No, I mean, it's all...
I mean, I'm sure there's devout Buddhist, but...
Right, I mean, but it's all very regimented. Like, there's no one who... if you go to a temple, there's no one who's going to say that they practice Buddhism different than the person next to them, right? Like, everyone does the same actions and the same chants and the same,
Right.
I mean, all of that is very much, regimented. If you don't like it, you can go to another temple, of course, but
Right.
That's all part of the experience. I think that the thing is that there's no one in Buddhism, there's no Buddhist who's going to try to cram it down your throat and say that if you don't do this...
That's kind of what I mean, like...
Right. I mean, that's the thing. Like, they're happy to have you participate, but no one's going to say you're going to hell if you don't.
Right.
That's the difference. That's the main difference.
Right. I feel like that's why so many people are like, I'm a Buddhist now. Like, it's a very, like, attractive religion.
Yeah. I mean,
that sense.
Yeah. I think that, in this day and age, the thing about a lot of things, it has to be convenient, right? And I think there's something about organized religion that's just inherently not convenient, because it just requires you to like be at a certain place at a certain time, right? And if you're looking for that sort of human connection, I think you have to be at a certain place at a certain time, and that's always going to be at some level inconvenient and at some level incompatible with some people's lives, right? And I've just never been a super social person either. Like, seeing the same people every week, to me just has always been like, I'd rather not.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that's just me.
Yeah. Just to clarify too, Kwak was not raised in South Korea. He was raised in Texas. That's why you keep referring to Texas. I just want to make that clear, so if anyone's confused. So his mom, well, you can say.
Yeah.
Just really quick.
Yeah, my mom's Korean. My dad's Vietnamese. My dad was a refugee from Vietnam, and he was sent to Amarillo, Texas. My mom,
who's from South Korea.
Yeah, who's from South Korea. She, moved to the United States. She got her bachelor's at University of Arizona, and I was born in Tucson, and then my mom and dad, they were you know, my mom's a traveler. My dad, not so much. He would rather just stay in one place for the rest of his life. But, you know, they had my sister in Hawaii, so, you know, and I think it was too expensive for them. So after Hawaii, they moved to Texas, and so I grew up in Texas.
Yeah, and that was when you were like 3.
Yeah.
So he was raised in Texas. That's why he keeps referring back to Texas, just if there is any confusion.
Yeah.
Okay, so the next question we have is from Leslie on Instagram, and she asked, what areas of your partner's belief system are most challenging for you to support?
My belief system?
Let me read it again. What areas of your partner's belief system are most challenging for you to support? So what's most challenging for me to support that you believe, and vice versa?
Yeah. I mean, I don't really think it's challenging to support any of your beliefs. You know, it's, you know, supporting doesn't cost anything. You know, I don't think there's not a lot of sacrifice you have to give to support someone, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think, you know, there's a difference between supporting and advocating for, and supporting and, you know, fighting for, you know, but just purely supporting, you know, people do that all the time. They just buy a little bumper sticker or a sign or something, and, you know, you can say you're supporting someone.
Right, without any action. In a way, supporting can almost be neutral.
Yeah, supporting is almost passive. I feel like.
Yeah. So you kind of like aren't against it, but you just like, or whatever.
It's like, good for them. You know, I think, you know,
is there anything that you're like, you've never been like,
Yeah, no. I mean, I'm happy to actively engage in any sort of behavior. I don't think there's any sort of, you know, ritual that you do or spiritual practice that you have that to me is like crossing a boundary of any sort. Like, you know, the only time I would think that you would cross a boundary is if there was any sort of like harm to someone else or harm
right, and you know I would never do that.
Right.
So.
Right, and so I don't think, you know, it's...
Well, sorry, keep going.
Yeah, I don't really think, you know, there's much in terms of what you do that I wouldn't even, you know, actively engage in or be a participant in.
Right, but going off of that, you're saying like not hurting anything or whatever, as long as I'm not hurting anyone. How would you feel if I ended up having or feeling like I was justified in hexing someone? Because that's a very interesting question, because to me that can very much hurt someone, but to you would think like it probably wouldn't because you don't believe in it. So how do you think you would feel about that if I was like, I'm gonna hex that bitch? Like, what would you do?
Well, you know, I mean, I think the first thing would be like, why would you want to do that to someone? Mm-hmm. You know, whether or not I think that the things that you're doing physically affect other people, whether or not that's true. I think the real question would be like, even if true or not, why do you want to perform this action on someone?
What's the reasoning behind it?
Right. And then, you know, if at that point it would be like, well, maybe, you know, you need help digging into those emotions, and then, you know, beyond that, I think that maybe it would be more of a relief for you in order to do it, or something to help you, you know, with your own mental health, right? Mm-hmm. I would see it from that perspective more than the perspective of like, oh, you're going to hurt someone.
Okay.
You know, like, I think it would be more for your own personal, release, yeah, or whatever, whatever performing that action does for you is like a stress relief or something.
Right. And we've never really talked about, like, you and I don't really talk about my magical practice that much. I guess that is one thing that we really don't do together.
Well,
which it's not because like you don't want to, or not because I don't want you to. We just don't. Like, it just doesn't really happen that often. So I feel like you and I have never had the conversation of like what are my ethics, like when it comes to hexing and cursing and like baneful magic.
Yeah, I mean,
and I because I definitely feel like there are some I'll just say there are some witches out there who hex and curse left and right. They don't really like. It's very frowned upon, right? For most witches, that's a no-no. So I definitely feel like there is some like serious soul searching that needs to be done before you really hex or curse someone. I feel like I have to feel very, 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 very justified in it. Like someone's really got to fuck up or hurt me or a loved one.
Yeah. I mean, I think as far as, your own magical practice goes, I think that I view as sort of technical knowledge that you have that I don't have.
Mm-hmm.
And so in the same way that, like, I wouldn't bore you with anything I know about technically. Like, I would never try to, like,
explain to me why.
Yeah, I would never try to, like, have a full-on conversation with you about troubleshooting an extruder issue with my 3D printer, or, like, compiling the C for the firmware or something like that.
Yeah.
Like, I don't have enough knowledge about magic, or, like, you've read so many books, you have your library of magic stuff, like, in some regards, like, that's too technical for me to understand the depth of your knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
And to try to, like, dig into that. Like, I know on a surface level what you're doing, and I know what you've explained to me.
Right.
But, that's how I view it. It's like your magic is like your technical thing. Like, I spend hours troubleshooting a website or something for my own personal pleasure, right? But I would never, like, try to talk to you about, like, every single aspect of it, right?
Right,
so,
I know surface level too.
Right.
Like what you're doing.
Right, and so.
Yeah, no, I get that. I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, because you were saying, like, you would ask me, like, let's reflect on this before you do something like that.
Right.
And I was trying to explain to you that, like, that's already a huge part of my magical practice when it comes to baneful magic, especially.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and I guess what I'm saying is, like, kind of like what you were saying with, like, you have so much more knowledge about magic and witchcraft than, I do. That's what you said.
Yeah.
I feel like because of that, you would just trust that.
Yes, I do trust that you do what's best.
That my magical ethics are pretty good.
just from who you are as a human being.
Right.
Like,
I
would never assume that you were, like, plotting to murder someone.
Right. No.
And if you had done that, I would be very surprised, right? I mean.
No. No, not that. Okay, let's see. Oh, so I guess I need to answer that part too. So there's really nothing that you wouldn't really support. You might question it a little bit, or, like, want to talk to me about it, but there's nothing that you wouldn't really not support.
I mean, and okay. we talk about...
In a nutshell, that's the answer.
Yeah, I mean, and we talk about, like, what our goals and our plans are with our hobbies and things like that. And of course, like, I always joke that I'm going to become like an evil CEO of like.
Yeah, and I know he's not really going to do that because I'm not going to let him do that, first of all.
Right.
But I know that you, like, I don't know. I know that you, like, would never actually do that.
Right, exactly.
So.
Exactly. Like, I know I could if I wanted.
That's how I feel about, like, really fucking someone else's life up with a curse. I'm like, I would never actually do it, but I could. You know, was like...
I mean, I could be a cog in the dystopian AI future that our globe could be a part of. I could aim my career towards that, but I never would. Right?
He could become Dr. Evil, but... Okay, well, I guess with me, I feel the same way. Like, there's nothing that you... Well, I guess it's like... don't believe because you're an atheist, but like do believe, whatever. There's nothing about your beliefs that I don't support.
Except the ghost thing.
Right, but let me keep going. Ghost thing, his theories on ghosts, we'll get into that. Okay, but I feel like the only time that I like struggle is if like I'm having anxiety about something, or like I'm worried about something like in the astral plane, or I'm like scared about something going on like within the witchy community. Not scared, but just like I just feel anxious about something that's going on like spiritually with me. And I feel like I want to tell you, okay, well, I'm scared that this happened, or like this person like is gonna, I don't know, like I don't really want to say exactly, but like just like when I have anxiety about myself spiritually, I sometimes get a little nervous opening up to you about it. And not because I think you're going to judge me, not because of that, because I know you love me and you support me no matter what. I know that.
Right.
But I know what your beliefs are. And I'm so scared that you're going to think I'm like so dumb, you know? Like rationally, I know that you won't.
Yeah.
But like at the same time, like, it is kind of tricky because you like don't believe in any of it. So how can you talk me through that? How can you help me through that if like you think it's all hogwash? You know what I mean? Like,
I mean, most of the time I can't. Right? Like I honestly,
I know most of the time you just doesn't know what to say.
I don't know. Because
you're not a spiritual person.
Right.
So you just don't know what to say.
Right. And you know, I think mostly it's just letting you talk about it. Right?
Yeah.
And then just like trying to understand the best I can.
Right.
And then, you know, having a outsider perspective on it. But I truly cannot give you, you know, the insider perspective that you want. Like, you need to find that somewhere else.
Right. Well, and that's when I talk to the devil or Vul or Lilith or something like that. Or I talk to another really close witchy friend.
Right.
Who like understands where I'm coming from. But I mean, sometimes that can be a little bit hard, like just generally, and only because like it can be a little hard knowing that you don't believe in any of it, only because like I don't know how to explain a certain anxiety that I'm having.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, that's really the only thing that I have ever really even a little bit struggled with. But we still get through that. It's not a big deal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As far as I know.
Do our thumbnails first.
Okay. That's stupid.